Nice introduction, Alexandra. Are we live?
Yeah, we are. Let's go.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Alexandra and this is Paul. We are both Run to One's coaches and mid-stakes cash game players. I'm also a mental performance coach. We've done a few streams on this channel, so maybe you know us, but yeah, short introduction if you don't. Paul, anything to say about yourself?
No, I think you're covering it. But today we're going to be looking at blind versus blind play. We're by no means experts, but we're going to look at some hands that people have sent into us and use some GTO Wizard alongside. And just so you guys know, whilst the stream is running, you can get 50% off Essential on Run It Once. So I'll put the link in the chat for you guys to use that, and you just have to input the word stream when applying the discount. I think that's everything. If you want to start jumping into some hands.
Yeah, we also run a Discord server if you want to connect with us. We run free study sessions weekly, and we also have a mentorship program that you can find more about in there. Paul is going to link it in the chat. Okay, so ready to jump into some hands?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is obviously blind versus blind. I notice villain is short stack, which makes me think he's probably recreational. The first thing I would say here is that in this situation, in general, we want to start opening a bit smaller because we want to basically disincentivize villain to shove on us. But if we face a recreational, I think we can basically just open based on the hand strength. And if we have a hand that that doesn't mind calling a shove, then we can also open bigger just to incentivize him to shove on us. You want to add anything on pre-flop, Paul?
No, just agree with you. With our whole range, there's a bunch of our range that wants to play versus big blind, but doesn't want to get shoved on. So yeah, usually I'd against this sort of stack, I'd open to 2 or 2.5 big blinds, sort of like in tournaments really. Open into 2 big blinds because yeah, you don't want to lose that extra half big blind or 1 big blind when you get shoved on. Obviously with sixes, if we face a shove, I think this would be a call. This is more of a tournament spot at 18 big blinds, but 19. Yeah, seems fine.
Yeah, I think it's a bit better in tournaments because there's no rake and also there's antes and so on, but yeah, I'm by no means a tournament expert. I agree, maybe opening smaller is fine, but with sixes, I think I would call just because I expect him to be a recreational and do some weird stuff. Okay, we get called and we go to a flop of 8-8-7. I think here... I think I would prefer betting, although I would like to mention there are some merits to checking because I think recreationals here are going to have ranges that are way too wide and it is going to be difficult for them to control their bluffing frequencies. But at the same time, sixes is a hand that kind of needs protection against some random overs and can definitely get called by worse hands such as worse under pairs, ace highs, king highs. So yeah, I think I do prefer a bet. What do you think, Paul?
I think on this board I would lean towards checking more often. I think they are going to have a super wide range, and I think they're going to be unable to control their betting frequencies. I also think they might start putting a little bit too much money in when they do stab here. And I think we could comfortably maybe start to check jam this hand just to deny loads of equity. We're still going to get called by a lot of worse hands. And I wouldn't be surprised if you sometimes just see a recreational just punt in this spot. So once you check them, just end up jamming a random hand that we're doing fantastic against. So yeah, I would personally lean towards checking myself. And just something put to us was the life of Shaquatic says, do you think we have an open shove range in this spot versus this broken stack?
That's actually a good question. Again, I don't play tournaments. I suppose in tournaments we're definitely going to have an open shove range, and If we put it that way, it's kind of a similar situation because it's still short stack, very wide ranges. So yeah, I think it would actually make sense to have some jumps here. I don't see why not.
Yeah, one thing I would say pre-flop when you are implementing an open shove range, something I see people make the mistake of is jamming with hands that actually don't make sense as small blind. So for instance, one of those hands would be something like ace two off or ace two suited, ace three, ace four. Those type of hands are really not the type of hands that you want to be shoving with. That's just going to be because against an 19 big blind stack, they're mostly going to be calling you off with the better ace X and pairs. So you would prefer to have something weaker, which can get queen high, king high to fold, and then obviously stronger portions as well. But yeah, that's just something that I've picked up on a while back when I did play some tournaments now and again.
Okay, if that's everything, let's see what happens in this hand. So our hero goes for a c-bet. Again, I don't really mind this. I think there's merits to c-betting as well. I don't have a huge preference in this spot. Paul prefers checking. We already know that. And now villain goes for a small raise. So in this spot, due to all of the things that I already mentioned, I think I would just shove this hand. I don't think recreationals tend to really raise trips here. Yes, they could have some 7x sometimes. If that's the case, I would just give him the money. But then there's so many random hands and random draws that he could have here that yeah, I think I would just get it in. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I think if we, as played, I think I would just get it in myself as well. Like I agree with you. There's no reason for him to raise 8x, given the stack sizes. I also don't think that recreationals will raise 8x. So yeah, I think this is most likely to be a 7. It could be a hand like pocket 5s down to pocket 2s, and then 4, 5, 5, 6, 9, 10, jack 10, jack 9, all those type of hands. So yeah, I think I'd like to just I'd probably go for a jam at this stack depth.
And this is what hero does. Call, and let's see. Wow!
Yeah, and you sometimes just get these random punts as well. So this is like one of the things that I think with the check would be nice is I thought that someone might be more incentivized to go for a big stab here with a hand like queen 6. But again, if he's doing this first, the small bet is going to be good as well.
Yeah, I think if you have data on the player you're facing, you can make a better decision here because the more passive he is and the more often he's going to check back these random hands or try to get to showdown with jack high and king high and queen 6, the more you probably want to bet yourself because checking is not going to bring you much V. It's just going to provide him with free equity. But the more aggressive someone is and the more he's going to stab and fight for this spot when you check, the more you probably want to check. Should we go next hand then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we face a smaller open size, again most likely a recreational. I don't see regs often playing these stack sizes. Might be a table full of them. We call, I think this hand against the 3x open is going to be a 3-bet from time to time, but when villain opens for a smaller size, our odds to call get a bit better, so our 3-betting frequency is going to be lower. That being said, I don't think it's a mistake to 3-bet this from time to time, even against a smaller open size. Anything to add about preflop here?
No, completely agree. Good thoughts.
Okay, we face the check on this texture, and I think, well, obviously, first thing that I would like to mention is that if this guy is a recreational, I don't think he has a well-constructed strategy here, but against the reg, he should probably use bigger sizes and check this board quite frequently. That obviously depends on the range configuration. So we should also be quite careful and not stab this board all that often. So I imagine we want to be a bit more polar here, at least if this was against the rag, and but better value hands and better bluffs and not these medium hands. So I think I would check this back very frequently, and when I bet, I would use a big size with other hands. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd for the reasons you mentioned, I'd also mostly just check this back. One thing I would just highlight to you guys in the chat here is I'd be much more incentivized if the board was something like Jack 6-2 and I had a 6x hand. I'd be much more incentivized to start to bet with that hand now, just because you're gonna have a lot more of villain's range that is gonna be overcards with equity that we can start to clear out. But yeah, with 9x on Jack 9-2, it's obviously much less of a thing. There's a lot less overs. So yeah, much prefer checking back here.
Yeah, but I guess on a board like Jack 6-2 with the 6x, if you do that, I guess you would pick a smaller size, right? I don't think that's worth like a 3/4.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go as polar, so yeah, maybe like half pot size, and I think.
Yeah, I think that also works. So our hero does check back and turns trips. Let's see what happens. There's another check, and at this point, I think we have a mandatory bet. Maybe in theory we're gonna get trappy and tricky with some trips sometimes, but in real games, I don't think there's a need for that, especially against a recreational. And the way I would approach this here is not in a like GTO manner, let's be balanced. I would just think about, first of all, what my hand wants to do. And I think my hand wants to bet really big, but then we also need to consider what his range is. And I think at this point he's quite capped to stuff like ace highs, some under pairs. I think he rarely is going to have better than that. So I think I might lose some value here if I go huge. So I think I would pick something like a 3/4 size. Do you agree with that, or would you do something different?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'd mostly bet this, and again, choosing the size. You mentioned we're still going to get called by a lot of King X and Ace X, as well as all those under pairs. So yeah, probably around about 75.
Okay, and that's what happens. We get called, and the river completes a flush, which, to be honest, I don't think it's all that relevant. With this line, I think villain hardly ever has a flush. So we face a check, and I guess the question here is how much we want to bet and what size we pick. This is definitely not a check back. What do you think, Paul?
I think I think we can mix between going a big size ourselves and then also just going for a smaller size. I think it definitely depends on the recreational. The reason I would sometimes choose a smaller size is if the recreational is the aggressive type of recreational. I think their range is mostly going to be bluff catchers, and aggressive recreationals will sometimes turn those into raises versus smaller sizes. So the way I would probably just balance this is that when I have 8-9 with a diamond, I'm going to choose a smaller size so that villain has the ability to check raise us, and I think he's just going to be check raising us way too wide. And then the rest of the times just going for a big size. What do you think?
I think I agree with you on the smaller size against a more aggressive player, but I think I would also use a smaller meaning like 75% or something like that against a passive player as well, because even though I think in terms of equity my hand is worth more than that, I think it's the same situation as I mentioned on the turn. I think his range is going to be really weak bluff catchers here, and even though in most situations you want to basically increase your bet size because you want to get called for more money, not necessarily more often, I think there are situations like this where if you increase your bet size to like an overbet or 2x spot size or stuff like that, you're just getting called way less frequently, which makes it probably less profitable than something like 80% or so. So I think that's the sizing that I would go. And if I know villain is like super, super aggressive and is going to check raise here as a bluff, I might size down, but I think that's quite unlikely with this line, even against someone who's a bit more on the aggressive side. I think this is not necessarily the line that they're just gonna start going crazy.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think most of their range is going to consist of maybe fives through to eights, and then some ace high, some king 10, king queen, 10-8 type of hands sometimes. A bunch of those last ones I mentioned might bet on the flop. But yeah, overall pocket pairs, ace high, I think is going to be their range. And yeah, I agree with you. Something like 75% probably ends up getting a lot more money long term against that range than say an overbet. But yeah, specifically against really aggressive recreationals, I think sizing down is going to get all that range to call and may induce some wild stuff as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's see what happened.
He bet and we get a fold. I think the sizing's fine. Well played.
Yeah, nice.
And for everyone watching, I think I said this before, but I think it's important to mark these kind of hands where you're not in for stacks, or it's not like a super complex check raise turn spot, whatever, because these are the spots that you're going to play most frequently. And if you're building a good thought process and approaching them well, that's actually going to add up to your win rate probably sooner than just looking at your bigger pots.
Yeah, for sure. And especially against recreationals as well. Like, just whilst we're on that rant, everyone loves to look at Pio and try to come to terms with what Pio is doing in every spot. But in a lot of spots, you just want to be thinking against recreationals about what their actual range is and how you extract the most money versus their real life range, as opposed to something like Pio.
Yeah, nicely said. Okay, before we go into the next hand, just want to remind everyone that during the stream and sometime after it, there is a discount to Run It Once Essential, a 50% discount that you can get. Paul is going to give you the details in the chat.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so this time we open from the small blind. Apparently, a lot of recreationals in this games or regs that play short stacks. I don't know. Okay, this is quite interesting. I'm a bit lost, to be honest. I think very often what's happening in these spots is that because of ranges being so wide, 6x becomes kind of irrelevant. And also both ranges miss a lot. So I think what might end up happening is that we are going to bet not all that frequently, but use a lot of really, really big bets because we have a huge overpair advantage. I've seen that in this trips boards in different spots, but to be honest, I've never looked at them blind versus blind. I think it would be quite an interesting spot to look at against the normal range. Yes, the recreational, I guess the ranges are going to be much wider. So these hands, oops, didn't want to do that. So I would guess these kind of hands that don't really want to check fold because they are going to stab often, and yeah, they don't really perform good as check calls, but they also beat a lot of their range. I think we want to bet this hand quite frequently against the recreational. And maybe use a smaller size. What do you think, Paul, about these boards, about this hand?
So yeah, I think this is in particular going to be one of the worst boards for small blinds, just because if we're talking, against a regular opponent and not a recreational, when we open, we're not going to be opening hands like 6-2 suited or 6-5 off or king 6 off. They are going to be calling a bunch of those hands. They're going to be defending, as I said, 5-6 off, 6-7 off, some of the 6x suited, king 6. So I think they are obviously going to have the nut advantage. on this board. And whilst we may still have the range advantage with all of our overpairs, I think, yeah, I'm not sure what that would lead to in terms of strategy, where they have the nut advantage, but we still have the range advantage. As for this exact hand, I think this would be one of the first hands that I would put into my check range. I don't think there's any merit to bet in this hand, and the reason for that is when we bet a hand like King 8 here, we're just going to be getting called by a lot of dominated hands. So I think every ace-x hand in villain's range is going to be calling, as are hands like King 9, King 10, King Jack, and Queen. So if I was going to bet a King X hand, I'd prefer to bet, maybe something like King 2, just because you might get some, King 3, King 4, King 5 to fold, maybe some King 7. Again, not sure that's likely. Probably not in suited varieties. But yeah, the way I would view this hand is if we're going to be using a big size and not betting all the time, I would be using hands that get a lot of better hands to fold, and I don't think that this fits into that range.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I was saying is that I think against the recreational, I think it's worth implementing a smaller size and betting this hand sometimes. And that is because, yes, I agree with your thoughts that we're not getting that much better to fold, although we might get quite a bunch of worse hands to call sometimes. But it's just because if you look at population tendencies, recreationals tend to overstab by quite a lot. So it's just that this hand doesn't really perform well as a check call. So the way I would construct my range against this guy is that I would check more hands that I'm comfortable check calling or check folding, and then bet a bit more of those hands. This is in particular against recreationals. And about what you said, having the range advantage but not the nut advantage, I think one thing to consider here is who you're playing against, because if you're checking, let's say, really high rig environment ranges and people follow them, offsuit 6x should almost never be a call here. So, and even if it is, 6x is so highly blocked by the board and the ranges are so wide that the fact that he has a few more 6x combos, I'm not sure it's going to be all that relevant to nut advantage, because it's just not going to be super relevant part of his range, blind versus blind. I think it would be an interesting spot to check the solver against different ranges and see what happens. What do you think?
Yeah, we could check this one. One thing I would say just before you do, though, just to address a couple of things, is one thing I would keep in mind is that if this guy, this guy's a recreational, 6x is going to be even more prevalent in his range than, like, if you look at GTO charts. So again, this would lead me to be a bit more careful. And when you said about a hand that doesn't really want to check call, I think this hand makes a lot of sense to check call, because I think even recreationals will realize that their ace high has a lot of showdown in this situation and will be less incentivized to start stabbing an ace high hand. Then I start to believe that hands like King 8 is quite close, but then hands like King 9, King 10, King Jack actually become like really, really nice bluff catchers, because you're going to be unblocking a lot of their hands that they're going to be stabbing with for bluffs. So 7, 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen high, and I think a hand like this does really well. You're unblocking all of those hands, and I think it would be a comfortable check call. But yeah, we can check this out. And just to say, Suanga just put in the chat, so there's a question of quad advantage here, I guess, with the wide ranges of blind versus blind. So yeah, that's what we're going to check. I believe there is a question of quad advantage, and I guess from what you're saying, Alex, you believe it's less of a thing.
Yeah, I believe it's less of a thing, and even though I agree with you that definitely a recreational is going to have more 6x, he's also going to have a wider range. So in terms of percentages, I just don't think it's going to be super relevant, but let's check. Okay, so first of all, here big blind's range is constructed for a high rake environment, so offsuit 6x is not really present in his range. You see, like 6 deuce is also supposed to be a fold preflop. So here his range is not that doesn't contain as much zigzags that we don't have. And yeah, it's also just the suited combos. So here we have, this basically means we have the nut advantage because this is a very low percentage of his range. And if you look here, we
Yeah,
or here, it's quite obvious. But we can also check this with a wider range.
Yeah, just before we go, I'll just let the guys in the chat know that if you're playing a GG and you're playing against a very, very good reg, so maybe you're playing 500 NL or 200 NL against a good reg, this is going to be relevant, right? Because they're going to be sticking closer to high rake charts. But if you're playing on PokerStars or 888 or any other sort of software, it's probably going to be closer to what we look at now, right?
Yep, so let's change the ranges. Does this look good?
Yeah, that looks better. Maybe just put in a little bit of 6-2 and a little bit more king 6 off as well. Maybe like 50%. I think it's like a mix. Yeah, that looks much better.
And I think this is interesting to watch, not only in this particular hand, but just to be aware that in some spots, just changing ranges, the strategy is going to change. And here, I think it's an expression of what you said, because what usually happens is the nut advantage dictates our bet size, and the range advantage dictates bet frequency. So basically here, now he has a bit more nut advantage as we gave him a bit more zigzags, but our equity is still huge and we have a huge range advantage. So the only change is that we're still allowed to bet very frequently, but we use a smaller size now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. Okay, so it does look like we do want to bet a hand like King 8.
Well,
just because it's a range bet.
Yeah, again, if you look at EVs, basically pretty much every hand has higher EV betting than checking. Things might change a bit against the recreational just because of their tendencies, but yeah. I think again in this hand it's not a mistake by any means to also check if you're facing a recreational, but I don't really think this size makes a lot of sense. Because at this point, like, you're really just getting worse hands to fold and better hands to call. If I bet this, I would just use a smaller size, especially against the recreational. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, again, just to address the difference of pile versus recreationals, I think I would against the recreational still implement checks here, just because I think they're going to go wild with a lot of hands. So if I have a hand like Ace King, I think that's a nice hand to start checking and look to call down.
Yeah, I think aces are also quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, specifically Ace King can still just get lots of value from worse in his range, Ace X and King X. But maybe if we had, say a weaker Ace X hand, I think that would be nice. Because villain might start turning their King, Queen, Jack 10 high into bluffs.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. He calls, and now the turn is a 5. I don't know, I wouldn't want to be in this situation in the first place, because at this point now I still think he can have a bunch of ace highs and some other King X that might fold, but at the same time, if he has a pair, this is not the board I expect recreationals to fold pairs, just because they are so tunnel vision of their hand strength, and they just feel like I have a full house. They don't realize they have deuces.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be looking to bluff this all that often. I would have liked
Alex, you've got the wrong screen up on YouTube.
Is it good now?
No, it's still GTO Wizard. There we go.
Sorry for that. That's a technical problem with my hotkeys. Okay, so yeah, turns a 5, and we check. It's basically the same hand, so you didn't lose much. Yeah, did you want to add something on this handball?
No, I was just going to say thanks to Shukwata for pointing that out because we were just running with it. Yeah, I mean, just in this spot now, this is exactly where I don't want to be against the recreational. I feel like we've put ourselves into a spot that we're now getting into like a small to medium-sized pot where we have like a really marginal hand. If we did go for a range bet and we kept it at a small size in, I still think we could have kept a lot of worse hands in, right? So we could have kept
Yeah.
in hands with two overs and backdoor flushes. Now when we bet that bigger size on the flop, I'm not sure if a hand like 8-9 of clubs is calling flop, you know. So yeah, not really sure what to make of this on the turn now.
Yeah, I think I would probably just give up. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree in just giving up. But
it's just like a situation we shouldn't be talking about, and there's a bunch of these hands where you just find yourself in on the river in a line that you should never be in with a hand that you should never have, and you're trying to figure out what to do on the river, and well, there's no good option because you shouldn't be there.
yeah, exactly. The good options should have been the good decision should have been made earlier in the hand, right?
Yeah, 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 quite typical. I think like what I would say about this hand is at least Hero realized that well if you make a mistake on the flop you don't have to follow through on the river, and I think that's something that a lot of people are guilty of, including myself in the past, just like waking up with a really wide range on the river that's like very low in showdown value, and I'm just like I have five high now I have to bluff, but like the mistake was actually betting all my five highs in that particular spot on the turn. So yeah.
Yeah, so now your whole range on the river is a bunch of non-showdown hands, which now you suddenly overbluff too much.
Yeah, and it's important to realize if you get there and you realize you make a mistake, you can stop by the river and be like, ah, okay, I just end up with too much five highs now. It shouldn't make another mistake and bluff all of them, you know.
Yeah, that's actually something that I think is quite important when it comes to people posting hands in Discord sections and just online in general. Is you sometimes get those hands where someone's on the river, they did a triple barrel and they've got like seven high, and people are like, yeah, it's fine, you have no showdown, but they don't realize that they're always doing that on flops and turns with all of their, you know, weak hands, and now all of a sudden they always have those type of 5, 6, 7 high hands on the river, you know. And instead of it being okay to just bluff because you don't have showdown, you should actually, you know, not run it every time.
Yep. Next hand.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we open small blind, get called by the big blind. There was a note on this hand saying this is a station E reg. An ace 5 deuce flop, usually at least button versus big blind. These boards should not be c-bet all that frequently. I think blind versus blind we can c-bet ace high a bit more often just because big blind is supposed to 3-bet quite a significant amount of those. So I think in this spot we have a bit more of a top pair advantage than big blind versus small, than button versus big blind, although I'm not entirely sure of that. But I still think on this low wheel ace high board we should have quite a decent frequency of checking, and king high is most often going to be checked unless it's like a low king high that has some added equity with a gut shot or backdoor flush draw or so on. So I think this hand I would mostly put into my checking range, especially against someone who I expect to be stationing. I mean, yeah, against the stationing reg we can probably bet it for value, but I think that's a bit exaggerated still. So. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I agree with you. Button versus big blind, we could bet some of our king X, you know, hands like king 3, king 4, king 6 type of hands. You're going to get better king X to fold. But blind versus blind, I'm not sure that's going to be as much of a thing. So yeah, I think most of my king X in this spot, I would look to check. And Seth Davis asked, do people play limps from small blind in these games or just RFI? I think these hands are a mix of a few different people's hands. I definitely play in games where people are starting to mix with limps as well. And for if it's happening in your games, one tip I can give you is on GTO Wizard. They actually have small blind limping ranges, and then what you're supposed to do is imposition. So some 3 big blind ISOs, some 5 big blind ISOs, and some checkbacks as well.
Yeah, one thing I would mention is unless you play high stakes or games that have really, really low rake, which is like not very often until like higher stakes online, I don't think a limping strategy is all that worth implementing because rake has quite a big effect and you don't want to get to play as many post flop.
It's really difficult to implement as well, right? Like if you're doing like a limp raise strategy, like you need to know what to do against a 3 big blind ISO, a 5 big blind ISO, like yeah.
Yeah, and it's also you need to think of efficiency. If you start studying something, you need to think of okay, how much time I'm going to put into that, and how much EV is that going to bring back. And studying something so complex as small blind limping is probably going to lose you EV or not bring you anything. So yeah, I wouldn't really recommend it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. Goes check. I would be curious of Payo's strategy on this one. The turn is
on the flop.
Yeah, on the flop, on the turn as well.
Just okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say just double check now if whilst it's there.
Okay, let's do that. So what was the board again? Ace-5 deuce rainbow, right?
Yeah.
This is against wider defending range. So we see that very infrequently. We still see that quite often, and these hands with gut shots and backdoor flush draws are actually betting really frequently.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see King 3 and King 6 in there. As we said, those are definitely the type of hands, as well as King 4, that you bet button versus big blinds. But yeah, small blind versus big blind, I thought they might be more of a check, just given the super wide ranges. That's interesting.
I think they will get better to fold. I don't think they're supposed to call King X without backdoor flush draws all that often. So
I think you get. Yeah, I was going to say some King 8s to fold, but yeah, to me that seems like really unintuitive, because even when you look at that sim, like that, the majority of King X is still calling. If you got King 9 off calling,
Yeah, but then you also have I think it's like a combo bet, because you get a bit better hands to fold, but you also get worse to call. If you look at this, a lot of like Jack High, Jack X, and then also when you get called by stuff like 5X pairs, like you have the king as an out, and you also have a gut shot. You have overs, so I think these bets kind of make sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Just very quickly check if anything changes if we change this range, because I found it quite interesting that in a lot of spots the strategy was really, really different. Let's see if it's the case here. So yeah, actually now it almost turns into a range check, because big blind misses a lot of combos that don't hit here. So yeah, I think this is quite interesting to see. Should we go back to the hand?
Yeah, sure. Zen Madman Poker asks about what stakes do you think that inflection point is where developing a limping strategy becomes more worthwhile? I honestly think, as Alexandra said, like really high stakes. I would personally think that like maybe a 5K is probably like the level, where like
2K maybe.
Really, yeah, where edges are like really, really thin and rake is really, really low. Before that, I think I wouldn't think it would be worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. And now on the turn, I think this is quite an interesting spot to talk about. Personally, I wouldn't have, against someone who I think is a good rag, I don't have spots where I use multiple sizings all that often, but here, especially if our flop betting frequency is low, once he checks back, I think by the turn we have a few hands that want to go for thin value. I think this one might fall into that category. But we also have some really, really strong hands. If our betting frequency on the flop is low, we're also going to have some two pairs here, some sets, fives, deuces, why not, nines. And I think I would have a 1/3 sizing here for hands like these, and maybe some lower ace-x, and then an overbet size for my better hand. And I guess the station you rag, I'm not sure if he's aggressive or not, but if we know he's making calling mistakes, I think I would like to start going for value myself with this hand for a small size. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I probably would start to implement two sizes here. And I know a lot of people would say not to do that because it's like extremely complex and it's really hard as a human to be able to execute that well. But you know, I think like GTO strategies have gone out the window on the flop just because how wide ranges are and how, I mean, when we were talking about the way we bet on the flop, we were wrong in some areas anyway. So yeah, on the turn here, I think I would mostly play, yeah, I'd mostly play two sizes and sort of align that with your thought process as well. And I think this is strong enough against the station reg to definitely start to go for some value. And I think we can definitely continue with some value on the river as well. If we go 1/3, I think we can still block river too.
Yeah, I agree. So let's see what our hero does. Yeah, nice, I like this. And the river's a 10. Yeah.
I was just reading something in the chat. We'll just see what you think about it. I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about just because you must have mentioned something. I think it's something to do with saying that we don't lose EV in some spots. Seth says, whenever you're looking at a model that spits out a similar EV, remember that it's playing perfect mixes everywhere. Playing simpler strategies that are easy to implement will stunt your growth as a player. Try to find optimal actions and sizes and figure out why.
So yeah, I agree with the first part for sure, that if a solver says the EV is similar, that doesn't mean the reality V is similar. In practice, they can be really, really far. And the second part was that as a beginner, you shouldn't. I wasn't.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I agree with the first part. We've already said, you know, looking at Pio, EVs are going to be completely different against real humans. And then the second part was playing simpler strategies that are easy to implement will stunt your growth as a player. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I agree with that. I know a lot of CFPs out there are using very, very simple strategies and crushing high stakes. So yeah, I don't think I agree with that part, but
I think yeah. I think it's like a two-faced thing. I think yes, using simple strategies and understanding them and developing from there, not trying to go too fancy, is the way to go. But on the other hand, I think the limitation of that, and this is something that I've noticed with myself, because I had that kind of approach, like trying to be very theoretical and have very simple strategies, is that sometimes you have some ideas, you want to get creative in a spot, but you kind of end up having this limiting beliefs that, no, this is my strategy and that's what I'm going to use, and that can actually really hinder your progress as a poker player. So I think it's a good guideline to have, but you need to be able to let it go in certain scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we went for some value. We see a 10 on the river.
That was a bit too fast. I'm sorry. But yeah, I think as you said, if we block turn, we can probably block river as well. And I don't think this stand is super relevant. Like, yeah, he's going to have some 10x from time to time. But when we use this size, we can go quite thin for value. And against the station reg, I think this is fine to go for value. But facing this now, I'm not really sure I would like to call, because I would say some people over-raise here, thinking this is capped and you're not going to have enough calls. But overall, if you look at mass data tendencies, especially in stakes under 500 NL, maybe 200 on some sides. People still overall under bluff these spots. So yeah, I think it's close. I wouldn't hate calling, but personally, without reads, I think I would prefer fold. What do you think?
I mean, I'm a station. I think this size is like, I don't know. I might read into this size a little bit. Like when you bet for this small size, you're gonna have a bunch of weak hands. I mean, you should still have a bunch of ace X in this range as well, and I suppose a bigger size can target that fine.
My thoughts here is that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go on. I'm still thinking.
I'm thinking that against this line that Hero took here, this race. So I'm not thinking he's going to have a strong range here or a lot of two pairs or that he's wrapping much or stuff. But I just think that pretty much ace 8 plus could raise here for this size for value. And on this board, I think most villains, if they are decent, I think most villains are aware that they should actually check back quite often and a lot of ace highs. So because of that, I give him a bit of credit for raising relatively thin here. That's why I think he's probably going to have enough value. But I might be wrong and I might be a bit too nitty. I just play in a field that is indeed quite meaty. So I guess if you play this on Bodog, it's a snap call. On GG, it's a bit.
Yeah, I think it's extremely close on river. I don't hate either option.
Okay, and he goes for a fold. Want to check GTO Wizard for this and. Whoop! What did I do? Sorry. And wrap it up after?
Yeah, seems good.
Okay, so this is not going to be super accurate, but let's say that we know this is a thing and we check this often. Otherwise it's going to take a bit too long to adjust.
9 of spades.
No, I brought the back door.
No, 9 of diamonds.
Okay, let me just allow this to use two sizes.
Zen Madman says this feels like a bit of a I want to fold size to me. I agree. That's what it seems like to me too.
Yeah. It does seem a bit like that. I agree. Oops, sorry.
Zen Madman also says King of Spades seems maybe not the best card to hold for bluff catching. I actually was thinking the same thing. I think that like a lot of villains checkbacks on the flop are going to contain king high hands. So first of all, I wouldn't want a king. Would prefer to call with like queen 9. And then also I think having a spade might be a bit of a downside. But yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it doesn't matter much, but maybe it is something if we think it's really close.
Okay, sorry. I didn't see that was checked. I hope this one is going to work. And yeah, I do agree about the spade thing. In a way, because that's one of his available bluffs. But I'm not sure people will actually bluff it. But yeah, I would definitely prefer not having spades. And you see here on the turn, we were actually quite right that we do want to have a really big overbet size and then a small size. And let's see what's our threshold for value betting. So we see king 9, basically any decent 9x is value betting quite often for this size. And even lower, stuff like 8. Yeah, I think this is fine. Supposed to
yeah. Just to quickly double back onto the point we made earlier was when we were talking about, if you look at all those hands mixing, the 9x hands, you could say, okay, well, it's fine with whatever we do here. The EVs are the same. But in reality, playing against the station reg, it probably makes more sense to find more bets with this type of hand, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's probably not going to find the folds he should.
Again, I would have to quickly change this so it allows multiple sizes on the river as well. Check, check, 9. Sorry, this takes so long. Bet, call, 10. Yeah, and you see, once we bet the turn, because we filtered our range quite a lot, you remember we still had quite a high checking frequency, we are also allowed to bet the river, and yeah, we can go quite thin for value.
Nice find. In game.
Oops.
I think sometimes you see people in game that just get to this spot and then they're happy to show down instead of like, this is a really nice thin value spot, right? Especially against station reg. So this is a spot that could increase your red line for sure. Sorry, increase your blue line.
I agree. So here, see that actually having the king of spades, at least in the solver, makes it a worse call. And yeah, again, this is probably not all that relevant because villain here is either massively over bluffing or probably massively under bluffing. I don't think he's going to be balanced in any way. So yeah.
Can you go back to the range that he's supposed to bluff? Because this is where I think that a lot of players will get here with 5x and 2x and start to turn that into a bluff. Because it's like, as a human, I think this is like a really horrible spot with 5x, right? Because you know that there's so much better hands in villain's range that can value bet this, and yet very often when you call, you're going to see a better hand. But a solver knows that you still have to make the call because of the pot odds you're facing. But humans, when they get in this spot, I think, especially if you're tagging this guy as like a station reg, sometimes they can also be a bit more creative and find more bluffs. I think you can start to see them bluff hands, especially like these 7-5, 8-5, Jack-5, Queen-5 type of hands a lot more than they should. And King 2 suited as well, like King 2 suited going for a pure call. I think that would be closer to a raise or fold from a human.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I didn't consider that humans actually feel so uncomfortable here with a hand like a 5x that they might just start turning it into a bluff. So yeah, that's actually a good point. And probably the more I think about it, the more I like raising. Him being a stationary rag and just getting to showdown very often probably means he might not be the type to raise thin enough for value either. Maybe that's just me giving him too much credit, so that means it's probably going to be even more overbluffed. So yeah, probably the more I think about it, the more I like a call.
Yeah, I looking at this sim now, like in game, that's how I think I'm a station. But yeah, looking at this in game, I'm even more convinced that I think it would be a nice call, and I really do think that the line that you take, or that the person took here, of blocking turn and blocking river, can definitely induce a lot of raises.
Yeah, I agree. All right, then, should we wrap it up for today?
Yeah, there seems to be no more comments in the chat. Just before we go, I'd like to remind you guys that for a short time after this stream, you can get 50% off Essential on Run It Once. Just follow the link in the chat and use the code STREAM. And myself and Alexandra also run a poker Discord where we do weekly hand review sessions just like this. So if you guys would like to join, then I'll also put the link in the Discord as well. Sorry, the link in the chat for the Discord. Cool.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone for joining. We are going to run this stream next week again, most likely at the same time, but we'll let you know in advance. And let us know on the Run It Once forum if you're interested in any specific topics or if you have hands that you'd like to send for us to review. Until then, bye bye and good luck.